Hey, welcome investors to the 40 Finance channel. PayPal stock has obviously dropped significantly, all the way down to about $120. This is a stock that is essentially my top single stock holding across all my investments. So you better believe that I'm digging in the weeds and doing a little bit of research on this one and trying to figure out what the best next move is. Now, I've mentioned on other videos that right now, with the information that we have today, I think PayPal's sort of fair value lands about $150. That takes into account the guidance that they've provided for this year and just sort of assumes that everything they said was going to happen will actually happen. So in my opinion right now, PayPal at 120, 125 is a very fair deal. So my personal plan is slow, steady, dollar cost average, bring my cost basis down. I still believe in the company for the long term. And while the long term I think is an easy win for PayPal in my opinion, I want to talk very quickly about the short term. So 2022, what are some of the catalysts that could get PayPal stock going back in the right direction? So I'm going to throw out 4 scenarios here. These are obviously just my personal speculation of events that could happen reasonably this year that would push PayPal's momentum back into the upward phase. Okay, the first scenario is actually relatively easy to accomplish, and that is actually just hitting the guidance and the consensus that is projected for PayPal going forward. Now, as easy as that sounds, this is where they got in trouble in Q1, where their consensus guidance for EPS and revenue growth were brought down by the company. They came out and said, we are a little worried about inflation and we are a little worried about supply chain, so we're going to go conservative. And obviously in this volatility we're in right now, nobody likes any negative comments. So the only comments that are acceptable in this day and age is plus 25%, plus 30%. So PayPal comes out and says, hey, EPS this year, at least what we know today, approximately flat. And that consensus of flat really comes in off of some headwinds, right? Which is a faster than expected eBay transition because that was sort of modeled out to go in certain steps and it's happening faster than anyone anticipated. And that's going to be fine. That's not the problem here. Don't worry about the eBay transition if you're a long-term stockholder. That's already been calculated into this company's plans. The only hiccup here is that it's just happening faster than we expected it to. And the second thing on that flat EPS guidance is they are expecting to pay a higher tax rate this year. So those two things combined with concerns about inflation and supply chain and consumer habits have squished everything down to flat EPS year over year. Now, one of the ways that you can beat flat is, of course, outperforming. And there is speculation, as we look here on SeekingAlpha, there is speculation that PayPal's coming in soft. So their guidance came in about $4.80 for the fiscal year. And analysts are going even softer than that at $4.67 as far as a consensus goes. So you see the problem here is you have a growth rate in the single digits, 1.42%. So if PayPal outperforms, even to the tune of $4.85 or $5 a share, if we get some relief in the second half of the year as things clear up, in that case you have a situation where the fundamentals of the stock will improve. Now, outside of those maybe scenarios, you are going to get to the second half of 2022 and analysts will start to talk about 2023 and what is the longer term projection there. Now, right now, analysts are saying 25% or so increase on the EPS for 2023, the fiscal year. We'll start looking at that much, much more closely when you talk about, let's say, Halloween time period, and the market will shift their attention to that too. You can start to work that into your forward PE and get an opportunity, you know, if it was today, to buy this stock at a forward PE of right about 20 or 21. So right off the bat, as the stock's been chopped down a little bit, simply hitting the guidance, okay, and seeing perhaps a little bit of relief in the second half of the year, that's going to be a boom for the momentum of this stock. And even beyond EPS, from a health standpoint, this is a company that grew double-digit revenue last year, and they're projected to grow double-digit revenue for the next several years in the future. So you're not necessarily buying a flat or a dying company, or perhaps whatever some of the other comments that you've read in different places. This is a company that is still growing, and we're talking about growth at the $30 billion level. So this is a lot different than a small cap that goes from 500 million to a billion, okay? These guys are growing big time dollars, and there's an element to their business at this level that is relatively predictable. All right, the next scenario where PayPal stock bounces hard in 2022 is just an expansion of their already existing stock buyback program. Now, PayPal does their buybacks a little bit differently than, say, like Visa, who formally announces how much it'll be and how many or how long the time period is. PayPal sort of buys in arbitrary troughs, right? You're never exactly sure when they're going to do it because they base it on their cash flow. However, in 2021, they did buy a couple $2 billion in shares across both the second quarter and the fourth quarter. But even last year, when we kicked off 2020, they had given out more stock-based compensation. So they sort of like started here, they chopped some off in a buyback, then they gave out more compensation, then they chopped some of that back. And not represented on here is the progress that they made in Q4 of 2021. I'll flip over to that. This is in the transcript here on Seeking Alpha. And by the way, quick pause for Seeking Alpha. You've seen a couple screenshots here that I've been doing. They're featured in a lot of my videos. I use this platform all the time. If you want to get a significant discount on a 1-year subscription to premium, check out my affiliate link in the description of this video. This is one of the ways that I support my channel, and in my opinion, it brings you extraordinary value as well. Okay, now back to the buybacks here. So what wasn't represented on the chart that I showed you earlier, this is in the transcript. In addition, free cash flow increased 38% in the fourth quarter to $1.6 billion, and we repurchased $1.5 billion of stock in the quarter. So they purchased $1.5 billion in the fourth quarter. That hasn't shown up yet on most charts in terms of shares outstanding. If PayPal did nothing but tried to hit their guidance and repurchase more shares, particularly to the tune of $1 billion plus per quarter, and try to avoid giving out some of the stock-based compensation, then I think you're seeing a relatively solid foundation point forming for this company. All right, the third idea, which is more of like a personal vendetta for me, is the worlds of Venmo and PayPal are very separated right now, okay? To the fact that you cannot very easily transfer money from Venmo to your PayPal account. This has been a known issue for a long time. It's not even like an issue where things aren't working. It's an issue of just how big PayPal is and what's tied to it in terms of tax information and stuff like that. Those two worlds need to connect. And again, this isn't a big technology ask, I think, that I'm throwing on the table. It's probably more of a regulation ask, right? Because PayPal gets used as many companies like actual website payment platform. Then you have Venmo that's supposed to be peer-to-peer. This is where fintech hits some gray lines, and I think PayPal is just being conservative in the way that these two worlds connect. Let's just say Venmo and PayPal accounts are sort of indistinguishable as a customer. Now you're starting to build an interesting super app proposition that can be used in a lot of places, and you don't have to think about Venmo and PayPal as two different things. It can just be all connected as one. I think there's a big opportunity there. All right, the last point on this sort of PayPal, Venmo ubiquity that I want to see is the fact that it's becoming very obvious that Venmo is PayPal's next platform integration into the world of e-commerce, potentially in person as well. All the more reason to get these two together more seamlessly. And if you missed the announcement, that's supposed to go live on Amazon. Pay by Venmo is supposed to be live on Amazon at some point here early in 2022. I have not checked the site to see if that has happened yet. But here's a full list of retailers that directly accept Venmo as payment. And you got some decent names in here. CVS is probably the biggest one. Foot Locker, Grubhub. You get the picture, Lululemon, all those. As this world expands, which it undoubtedly will as they have more data about which kind of consumers does Venmo bring into the store. And I think for me, I see a distant world maybe 10 years from now where you're going to get a shift, right? You're going to shift the proliferation of Venmo as a payment platform. And maybe PayPal drags back a little bit, or PayPal turns more into a POS for the retailer, which is basically where it sits now. But let's just say it has limited use in the future for the consumer. Venmo is the consumer side, which is holding money, moving money, etc., credit cards, whatever you want it to be. And if you're a consumer, you'll know all about Venmo is how you pay for things. And if you're a retailer / business, you'll know all about PayPal, how you accept those payments. All right, the fourth and final sort of momentum mover, in my opinion, would be acquisition, right? So we know that last year they were knocking on the Pinterest door. Maybe that rumor got leaked way too early, but they pulled back from it. I can tell you, as someone who knows a lot about PayPal and Pinterest, I'm very glad that they didn't do that deal. However, the concept of acquisition, I think, remains a hot topic for PayPal, and they need to continue talking to other companies. Now, from my perspective, though, they need to think strategically, right? So when they acquired Honey, the game on Honey was really user accounts, consumer accounts. These are people that are using coupon codes online. So they're doing online shopping, and PayPal had an easy way to integrate them into their world. And the great thing about the Honey acquisition was just the fact that it wasn't a store. They didn't have to worry about bringing stuff in, selling goods, running retail. Honey was a glorified coupon code website / internet utility that had a lot of users. However, there are not a ton of those Honeys out there. So you have to start thinking about other places where you can reasonably add a large amount of consumer accounts, while at the same token making sure that you're buying the right consumers who are going to use the tools that your core business offers. So you see on the screen here, I just stumbled on this article, and it's got a few ideas in here. This is not written explicitly for PayPal, right? These are just companies that are likely to be acquired, or are certainly going to be in the mix for acquisition talks. And they go on to say, insurance tech. Of course, we know Lemonade, but there's quite honestly dozens of others. So would purchasing something like Bright Health, Clover, Oscar Health, Lemonade, does that make sense? And what kind of user base do you get out of that? I'm kind of 50-50 on an acquisition and insurance, to be honest with you. I would much rather see them pull in shoppers, right? So undoubtedly insurance shoppers are shoppers. They probably buy other things too, right? But it's not like a one-to-one match, in my opinion. And scrolling down here a little bit further, you have Better and Acorns as potential targets. So Better is sort of an upstart mortgage, low-cost mortgage provider that basically uses the internet exclusively to develop leads. And then you have Acorns, which is a savings platform. Of the two, I'd probably go Acorns. just because I wouldn't want PayPal to be distracted in a world of mortgages and mortgage rates. But a lot of it on the Acorn side for me would just be determined by how many users they have. All right, the last one on here, crypto and DeFi. This probably doesn't apply to PayPal. They've already got crypto in their world, and it'll build out more and more. On the flip side, though, there are some people that I've heard talk about getting stock trading might be a nice addition for the Venmos and PayPals, in which case maybe they would want to buy Robinhood. And I guess for me on the stock trading side, sure, I don't know how many accounts Robinhood has. If you could pull consumers that way, do the Robinhood users translate well into Venmo, PayPal customers? That's the part you have to think of when you think about these acquisitions. So bottom line, there's a lot of opportunity for acquisition, and it wouldn't surprise me if PayPal makes, multiple small acquisitions throughout the year. Question is, will they find one that boosts their stock momentum before the end of 2022? All right, guys, so I'm proposing 4 things that could boost PayPal stock price in 2022. First one is easy, which is just hit the guidance that's on the dartboard right now. Potentially outperform in the second half of 2021. Personally, I think they're sandbagging a little bit, so I think that's kind of sort of in the bag anyway. But I think the second half of the year looks a lot different than the first half of the year for the positive in terms of the economy. All right, secondly, we talked about stock buybacks. This is not a new idea for PayPal. I think, in my opinion, they just need to get more consistent. Did $1.5 billion in Q4. Be honest with you, I'd like to see them do at least $1 billion in all 4 quarters of 2022, particularly in a year that you've come out and projected a flat EPS. All right, the third thing in there is making some progress on the Venmo side. Bringing ubiquity to Venmo and PayPal. Those accounts should work together much more smoothly. I'm sure they're working on it. I'm sure it's based on regulations. There's probably a lot of problems in there with sales taxes and reporting and stuff. But we really need to combine those much sooner than later so that over time, Venmo can become the consumer platform and perhaps PayPal will stick to being a POS type platform. All right, and the final idea there was, of course, acquisition. We talked about a few targets. I'm all for acquisition, but I want to see the user base that you're acquiring have potential to turn into Venmo, PayPal users. All right, investors, let me know what you think about these ideas I have here for PayPal stock. Do any of them become a reality and boost this stock out of the rut it's gotten itself in early here in 2022? Please give the video a like, help support the channel. Don't forget to check out that Seeking Alpha special offer in the description. Save yourself some money. We will see you on the next video.